In this lab, I'm going to show how to configure multi-layer switching. Multi-layer switching is part of the new CCNA exam, so it's a good thing to know. Multi-layer switching includes layer 2 switches and layer 3 switches. So in this example, I've got two hosts. I'm going to configure network connectivity so that each host can access applications on server 1 and server 2. So the layer 2 switch has host 1 and host 2 and server 1 connected to it. There's going to be a trunk uplink to layer 3 switch. Then there's going to be an uplink to router 1. That's going to be a WAN router. That goes over to another WAN router. That's to a data center switch and a data center server 2. So the first thing I'm going to do is start with layer 2 switch. I'm going to assign VLANs. There's VLAN 10 to host 1, VLAN 11 to host 2, and VLAN 12 to server 1. So I select the switch, go to CLI, and type enable, then configure terminal. So the interface that I want to start with is 01. That connects to host 1. I want to assign that to VLAN 10. So I type interface, fast Ethernet 01. Then switch port mode access. That makes it an access port. And switch port access VLAN 10. That assigns it to VLAN 10. Notice that it creates the VLAN 10 automatically. Now with Cisco CLI, I can use the up arrow, and I can go to change that to 0 to 11 instead of retyping everything. So 11 is connected to host 2, and I need to make that VLAN 11, assign it to VLAN 11. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to make it an access port, and I'm going to assign it to VLAN 11. I'll do the same thing with server 1. It's connected to 2.1, fast Ethernet 2.1. So I'm going to go to 2.1. I'm going to make it an access port. And I'm going to assign it to VLAN 12. So all the VLANs are assigned now. Each are assigned to a specific switch port. So there's 3 VLANs. Now I need to assign a trunk port. So that's 3.1. And the trunk ports, what they do is they forward multiple VLANs. So 3.1 on layer 2 switch has to be made a switch port. So I'll select 3.1. So I'm now configuring interface 3.1. And the first command is switch port mode access, or excuse me, switch port mode trunk. Next thing is switch port no negotiate. And this command is recommended by Cisco to prevent DTP frames from forwarded across the trunk link. And DTP frames is part of auto negotiation. I'm creating a static trunk, so I want to turn off any DTP frames going across that trunk link. And it's done for security reasons, a security best practice. Next thing I want to do is tell the switch what VLANs I want to permit across that trunk link. In this case, it's going to be VLANs 10, 11, and 12. So range 10 through 12. Switch port trunk allowed VLAN 10 through 12. If I don't do that, it'll allow all VLANs. So that's not a good security practice. So at this point, everything's configured on the layer 2 switch. So I'm going to go back up. I want to save the configuration to the startup. So next time the device starts, it'll have the correct configuration. So now I'm going to move over to the layer 3 switch, and I want to configure 01, fast Ethernet 01 as a trunk interface. So I'm going to go to enable, configure terminal. I'm going to start with interface FA01. So I can just type FA instead of fast Ethernet. It's the same thing. At this point, it's going to be the same commands. Switch port mode trunk and switch port no negotiate. Then tell it to allow VLANs 10 through 12. through 12. So that's permitted now. So that trunk link is now configured. So what I need to do now is go up one level. Now I'm working on the layer 3 switch. I want to enable layer 3 routing. So type IP routing. That enables routing. And after this, what I want to do now is I want to configure SVIs on this layer 3 switch. An SVI is a default gateway for a VLAN. So when, for example, VLAN 10 host 1 wants to send packets, it sends it to a default gateway because it's in a layer 2 domain. The layer 3 switch then forwards it on to another subnet. So what I need to do is configure SVIs for each VLAN. So I'll type interface VLAN 10. I'm going to give it an IP address that's in the same subnet as VLAN as host 1. So 172.16.10.254. Host 1 is in the 10 subnet. It has nothing to do with VLAN 10. It's just that's the subnet that I gave it, 172.16.10.0. So this IP address is 172.16.10.1 for host 1. So this is 10.254. So they're in the same subnet. I made them match the VLAN name. It's a convention done sometimes. Next one is VLAN 11. So I'm going to go to interface VLAN 11. And I'm going to assign it to, I'm going to give it an IP address of 11.254, so it's in the same subnet as host 2. And then I'm going to go to VLAN 12. And I'm going to give an IP address of 12.254. This is inter-VLAN routing. Before it was done on router 1 as sub-interfaces. Now you can do it on layer 3 switches. It's preferable to do it like that. So now I've configured all these SVIs on the layer 3 switch. And go to layer 3 switch and verify they're all up and running, and they are. So what I'll do is now I have to configure these default gateways, those same IP addresses. I have to assign the default gateways on each host in the server. So if I go here, the gateway for host 1 is going to be that same address because it's going to point all the packets to that IP address. So here it's 10.254. So this is the gateway address that the host 1. Typically DHCP does this automatically. So there it is there. If we go to desktop, command prompt ipconfig /all. There it is there. Default gateway 10.254. That's where the packets go from layer 2 domain to layer 3 domain. I'll do the same thing on VLAN 11 as well. So 172.16.11.254 is its default gateway. That's the SVI on the layer 3 switch. And the same with server 1. It's going to have a 12.254. So that's all configured. So the next thing after that is now this layer 3 uplink to router 1. So this 04 is a switch port, but I'm going to make it a routed port because this is just a layer 3 broadcast domain between this. Just an IP. It's not a trunk. It's just a standard layer 3 link. So go through the instructions here. This is available. I'm now working on creating this uplink here. So 04. So I need to turn off it as a switching port. Make it so it's not use no switch port. So it's not switch port anymore, but a routed port. So to do that, I use the command. Actually, I'll go to the interface first. I'll go interface FA04. Then I'm going to type no switch port. That makes it a routed port. Next thing, I want to give it an IP address. So that'll be 172.16.1.1. That's easy enough. No shut, because it's a layer 3 interface. So what happens is, this is 172.16.1.1, so 2.0 has to be in the same subnet because it's a neighbor link. So I'm going to make that 170, this actually is 172.16.1.2. That's the IP address of Fast Ethernet 2.0 and router 1. So they have to be in the same subnet. So that's configured now. So at this point, this has been configured. So that interface on layer 3 switch is active. Now I have to have a default route for packets. So I'm going to configure a default route on layer 3 switch, and that so any packets that arrive that are going to the data center or somewhere else, the default route will forward them to router 1. So a default route is it's a route that points packets to an IP address. So in this case, it's going to be IP route. This is the command for it. 172.16.1.2. So 1.2 is that FA20 router 1 interface. So it's saying all packets not in the local subnet or that I don't know of, forward them to that interface. So it forwards them to router 1. That's all there is to it. So at this point, I'm going to update the startup configuration with copy run to start. Now at this point, I'm going to ping both servers from the hosts to verify there's network connectivity. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go over to the host now. And here it is, host 1. I'm going to go to a command prompt. And I'm going to ping that data center server, 3.1. So this example here, it's going to ping. So I'm pinging from host 1 over to 3.1. That's on server 2. So it goes through a layer 2 domain, a layer 3 domain, and over to a different subnet. So I got one reply. So if I try this again, it'll work. I'll get all 4 this time. The reason is because the ARP tables are just updating on the routers. So that works fine. I get all 4 replies from 172.16.3.1. That's the server 2 IP address. So now what I want to do is I want to try server 1. In this case, I'm sending a ping from host 1 to server 1. That's on VLAN 12. So we'll go over here. And there it is, I got 3 replies. Let me try it again. And there it is, I got all 4. So I want to go over to host 2 and do the same thing. Make sure it can connect from VLAN 11. In this case, I'll go ping 172.16.3.1. And the replies happen fast because, like I said, the ARP tables are updated. So it's a little faster with host 2 now. Now I'm going to try to ping server 1 from host 2, and all 4 replies. Works fine. So that verifies there's network connectivity, and that's how multi-layer switching works.